It's 1976, where the river meets the Styx. I seem to have slipped through space and time. The clock stuck at 12:04. The daylight is no more. Something's watching from the woodline next door. So until the sunrise breaks, we'll keep doing what it takes. Keep the fire lit and the radio on for now. You better bundle up tight, 'cause the midnight holler's on tonight. You've tuned in to WHAINT Radio.
Good evening, friends. This is WHAINT Radio, coming to you live from the far end of the holler. The request line's been dead since Tuesday. The weather wire keeps printing the same storm warning, and the newsman down in Atlanta still thinks it's 1976. Maybe he's right. Maybe we're the ones who got lost. Either way, the red on-air light is glowing, and as long as this microphone keeps working, I'll be right here with you. I'm Jonah, your host for the evening, and this is the Midnight Holler, where we bring you the stories folks only tell when the house is quiet and the woods outside start listening. I love fire watch stories. At 200 feet above the trees, you're bound to see something a little disturbing. Joel, the guy who sent in tonight's story, saw more than a few things and came face to face with people with some real sinister intentions. I'm passing it off to my co-host and fellow radio bunk, Lewis. Take him home, brother.
The Smoke That Stays. The story for Midnight Holler Radio. The following is adapted from the personal journal of Joel Ardis, former U.S. Forest Service Ranger and Fire Lookout Observer, Station L7, Plumas National Forest, Northern California. The journal was recovered in October of 1973. Joel Ardis has not been located. What you're about to hear is his account, in his own words, of 14 days alone in the mountains above the Feather River Canyon. We present it here without alteration. Some of what he wrote, we wish we hadn't read. Part 1. The Climb Up. I've been a lot of things in my life, but patient has never been one of them. I spent 11 years as a ranger with the Forest Service, first up in Oregon, then down in Northern California when the divorce made staying in Medford feel like wearing a hair shirt. I walked trails. I sighted campers for open fires during red flag conditions. I pulled a kid out of the Rogue River one August and gave him mouth-to-mouth on a gravel bar while his parents stood there screaming like it was somehow my fault he'd fallen in. I found a dead man once too, curled up under a Jeffrey pine like he decided to take a nap and just never bothered to wake up. Cardiac, the coroner said. Could have been anything, I thought. A man alone in the woods long enough starts looking for exits. After 11 years of all that, the service asked me if I wanted to transition into fire observation. Longer rotations, solo work, a tower in the backcountry. They made it sound like a promotion. I took it because I was tired of people. That's the honest answer. I was 41 years old. My ex-wife had remarried a dentist in Grants Pass. My knees ached every morning in a way that promised they'd feel worse by 50. And the only conversation I've had in 3 weeks that didn't involve paperwork was with a black bear who'd gotten into the supply shed at Quincy Station. So yeah, obviously, I took the tower. The station they assigned me was L7, a 60-foot aeromotor tower sitting on the ridge line at about 6,000 feet, roughly 22 miles east of Quincy as the crow flies. The access road, and I use that word generously here, was 4 miles of logging track that ended at a turnaround, barely wide enough for even my own truck. From there, it was another 1.5 miles on foot, with everything I'd need for the rotation on my back, and in a game cart that I had rigged from an old wheelbarrow frame. My rotation was 14 days. 14 days, then a supply run and relief. Then back up if I wanted to work. And trust me, I wanted to work. The pay was modest, the solitude was not. I'd done 2 prior rotations at different towers, one in the Trinity Alps and one up near Lassen. I knew what I was walking into, or at least I thought I did. I'm going to write this down the way it happened, day by day, because when I came back down off that mountain, I sat in the parking lot of a Denny's in Quincy for 2 hours before I could make myself go inside and use the phone. And I realized that if I didn't write it all down, while it was still raw and close, I'd start softening the edges of it. I'd start making sense of things that don't really make sense. I talked myself into believing that some of what I saw was exhaustion or altitude or the particular loneliness that comes from spending too many nights alone with just your own thoughts and the wind in the radio antenna. I don't want to do that. So here it is. Journal, Rotation L7, Plumas National Forest. Day 1, Tuesday. Weather conditions. Clear. High of 68 degrees Fahrenheit at elevation. Visibility unlimited. Wind southwest at 8 to 12. Made it to the turnaround by 07:30. Took me 2 trips with the cart to get everything staged at the trailhead. Food for 14 days, extra radio batteries, 4 gallons of water to supplement what's in the cistern. My kit bag, 2 changes of clothes, and the lockbox with the duty log and maps. I travel light out of habit. The tower itself is stocked with the basics: cot, propane burner, the Osborne firefinder, binoculars, and enough canned goods to survive a siege. Previous observers sometimes leave things behind: paperbacks, a chess set once, a bottle of Merlot that I drank on my second night at Lassen, and I felt pretty guilty about that ever since because it was actually pretty good. The trail up to L7 follows a ridgeline for most of its length, which means the views open up fast. By the time I was halfway, I could see the canyon to the west, the river glinting silver down the green dark of it, and to the north, the smudged blue silhouette of Lassen Peak, still wearing a little snow on its shoulders, even in September. Good fire weather, which is to say dangerous fire weather. Low humidity, dry fuel. The grasses along the trail were the color of sand. The tower was in decent shape. The previous observer, a guy named Rutherford, according to the duty log, had left it pretty clean, which I appreciated. Some observers live like raccoons. Rutherford was not one of those. His last entry was dated September 1st, and the entry itself was brief. Quiet rotation, nothing to report. Wind shift on day 11 bore watching but dissipated. Good luck. I made my own first entry, ran a radio check with the Quincy dispatch desk, and spent the afternoon orienting myself with the Osborne. I mapped out the landmarks. A bare granite outcropping to the northeast I decided to call it Old Bald, a drainage that ran east to west below the ridge. A cluster of lightning-struck snags about 3 miles south that looked like broken teeth against the sky. I made dinner, canned soup, crackers, half an apple, and sat outside on the catwalk to watch the dark come in. The stars out there are really something. I grew up in Sacramento, which is to say I grew up thinking stars were something you saw in photographs. Out on that ridge at 6,000 feet with no competing light for 20 miles in each direction, the Milky Way is a physical thing. You feel like you can reach up and drag your fingers through it. I went to bed at 21:30 and slept like a man who'd earned it. One thing though, and I'm going to mention it now because I don't want to forget it. When I did my last perimeter walk before dark, I found a dead rabbit at the base of the tower's eastern support leg. No visible trauma, no blood, just dead, curled up with its eyes up and open, looking at nothing. I didn't think much of it at the time. Animals die. It's just a thing they do. Day 2, Wednesday. Weather. High overcast by midday. Burned off by 1400. High of 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind calm in AM. Southeast at 6 to 10 by evening. Nothing significant to report during the day. I conducted my standard observation rotations, full 360-degree sweeps every 30 minutes, supplemented with the binocular work of any smoke-prone drainages. I spotted 2 deer at the edge of the eastern clearing around 0900, which was the most exciting thing that had happened before noon. At 1100, I found the second animal. It was a squirrel, gray, on the south side of the tower ladder base, dead, same as the rabbit. No blood, no obvious cause. Eyes open. The position of it was strange. It was sitting upright, back against one of the support legs, like it had walked there and sat down. Like it had decided that was where it wanted to be, and then whatever happened to it just happened. I told myself it was a coincidence. 2 animals, a rabbit and a squirrel. Things die in the woods all the time. I know this better than most. I buried them both in the clearing with the small folding spade I carry for latrine purposes. Said nothing over either of them, and then went back to the cab. The day was uneventful after that. I ate, read, did my observation rotations, checked in with dispatch. But then, this was around 21:15, right after dark, just after full dark. I was doing a last binocular sweep from the catwalk, mostly habit, not expecting anything because you can't see a fire in the dark until it's big enough to already be a problem. I was scanning the northern tree line, the dark mass of the mixed conifer stand that ran down the slope to the drainage, when I saw something that made me stop. A figure, standing at the edge of the trees maybe 400 yards out, human-shaped, standing still. I held the binoculars on it for a long time. In the dark, with no moon yet, the binoculars weren't doing me much good. I was looking at a shape, a silhouette that was slightly darker than the tree line behind it. But it was there, a person standing at the edge of the timber, looking up at the tower. At least that's what it felt like, that I was looking at the tower, looking directly at me. I stood on that catwalk for probably 10 more minutes watching. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't do anything. Eventually the cold got to me and I went inside. When I looked up again through the cab window, the tree line was empty. Could have been a hiker, could have been a hunter. People wander up here, it happens. The trail's not marked, but it's not a secret either. I noted it in the duty log, 21:15. Observed possible human figure at northern tree line, approximately 400 yards. No movement, no response to visual check. Figure gone by 21:30. No other activity. I didn't sleep as well that second night. Day 3, Thursday. Weather, clear and hot. High of 76 degrees Fahrenheit. RH, 14% by afternoon. Red flag conditions, underlined. Wind northwest at 15 to 20, gusting to 28. Red flag day. I was busy, which was good. High winds, low humidity, dry fuel. That combination is the one that turns a small smoke into a headline. I did full sweeps every 15 minutes and spent most of the afternoon with my eyes on the southern drainages, where the fuel loading was heaviest based on Rutherford's notes. Nothing ignited, but I earned my pay just watching for it. Found another dead animal at 06:45 before the wind came up. This time it was a bird, a Steller's jay. Iridescent black and blue, folded up at the base of the northern support leg. I almost stepped on it. Like the others, no blood, no injury I could identify. I stood there looking at it for a long time. 3 animals dead in 3 days, all at the base of the tower, all dead without apparent cause. Now, I'm not a superstitious man. I want to be clear about that. Now, I grew up Methodist. I relapsed in my 20s. By the time I hit 40, I'd arrived at a comfortable position in life, that the universe is a largely indifferent machine with no particular opinion about any of us. But 3 animals, 3 days, tower base. I picked up the jay and buried it with the others. I spent the rest of the morning feeling something that I couldn't quite name. A background hum, like a radio left on in another room. The wind died around 1900. I ate dinner and went outside to sit on the catwalk. At 20:50, the figure was black. At 20:50, the figure was back. Same position, same tree line, same stillness. But tonight, the moon was up. Thin, but present. And I had better light. I pressed the binoculars against my face and held my breath. It was a person. I was certain of that now. Wearing dark clothes. standing at the edge of the timber with their arms at their sides, face turned up toward the tower. They were too far away for me to make out features, but the shape was unmistakably human. Tall, thin, maybe, or just made to look that way by the distance. I cut my hands around my mouth and yelled, "Hey, you need help? This is a fire observation station." My voice went out into the dark and the dark swallowed it. The figure didn't move. I yelled again. Nothing. I went inside and got my flashlight. I Morse-coded 3 long flashes toward the figure, the universal distress check. The figure stood still for another 30 seconds or so, and then, and I watched it happen, stepped backward into the trees and was gone. Clean, smooth. Not spooked, not hurrying. Just decided to leave. I called dispatch, reported a possible unauthorized individual in the observation zone. They logged it and said they'd note it for the patrol rotation. The patrols up here are nobody's priority, and I knew it. The ranger district was short-staffed, same as everywhere, same as always. I sat by the window most of that night watching the tree line. The figure didn't come back. The wind picked up around 0200, and I sat in the dark, listening to it work its way up through the timber, all that creaking and sighing, and tried to decide whether I was scared or just unsettled. There is a difference, I think. Being scared is about your body. Being unsettled is about your mind, realizing it doesn't have as firm of a grip on things as you thought it did. I was definitely unsettled. Day 4, Friday. Weather, clear. High of 69 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind northwest at 8. Visibility, excellent. I did something I hadn't done since my first week as a Green Ranger. I locked the door. The tower cab has a door on it with a simple deadbolt, the kind that you'd find on any interior bathroom, not designed to stop anyone serious. I locked it anyway. It made me feel better, which told me something about the state that I was in. No dead animals at the base. I checked carefully at first light, circled the entire tower twice. Nothing. I don't know if that was reassuring or the opposite. Spent the morning on OBS rotations. The air was crystal clear after the previous day's wind. I could see deep into the eastern mountains, past the ridge, into terrain that doesn't get names on most maps. Good country, old country, the kind of landscape that was old before anyone came to look at it, and will be old long after we're done looking at it. At 1400, I had a visitor who came in the conventional way, which is to say, they came up the trail on 2 feet in broad daylight. A man, maybe 50, a little bit stocky, wearing a canvas coat despite the warmth. He came out of the timber at the south end and walked across the clearing to the tower and called up to me. "Forest Service?" I came out to the catwalk. "That's right. This is a restricted observation station. Trail access is... I know what it is," he said it pleasantly enough. He had a broad, weathered face and pale gray eyes that caught the afternoon light in a way that made me think of river ice. "Just wanted to know if you'd seen any of our people up here. We've got a group camping down in the drainage. Lost track of a couple of our folks." "What kind of group?" I asked. "Spiritual retreat," he said. "We come up here every year about this time. Nothing that ought to concern the Forest Service." He smiled when he said it. "Have you seen anyone? Up near the tower, maybe?" I thought about the figure at the tree line. Thought about it for what felt like a very long time. "No," I said. "Nobody up here but me." He held my eyes for a moment, long enough to make the moment a little strange, and then nodded and smiled again and said, "Well, you'll let us know if you see anything, won't you? We'll be in the drainage a few more days." He went back the way he came. I watched him until the trees took him. I called dispatch and reported the contact, described the man, asked if there were any permitted group camps in the Feather River drainage. Dispatch checked. Said there were no permitted sites in the L7 observation zone at all. A spiritual retreat, he said. Nothing that ought to concern the Forest Service. I ate dinner that night without tasting it. Day 5, Saturday. Weather conditions. High clouds. High 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind variable. Calm by evening. At 05:30, before full light, something woke me. It wasn't a sound exactly, more like the absence of sound. That sudden held breath quiet that falls over a forest when something has alarmed everything that lives in it simultaneously. I'd felt it before, once in the Trinity Alps when a mountain lion had walked through camp, but that time I'd been able to pin the cause. This time, I lay on the cot in the dark and felt my heart doing something complicated in my chest and couldn't identify what I was listening to. Then the quiet broke and the woods went back to normal, wind, insects, the distant percussion of a woodpecker, and I got up and opened the door and stepped out on the catwalk in the gray pre-dawn. There was a smell. I noticed it immediately. Wood smoke, but not the clean smell of a campfire. Something else underneath it. There was a smell. I noticed it immediately. Wood smoke, but not the clean, resinous smell of a campfire. Something else underneath it. Something animal and wrong, like hair burning. I scanned the drainage with the binoculars. Nothing visible, no smoke column, no glow, but the smell was strong enough to taste. Down at the base of the tower, on the ground, arranged in a rough circle around the 4 support legs, were 12 dead animals. And I counted them twice. Birds mostly. 3 ravens, 4 smaller songbirds I couldn't identify from height, 1 hawk, a red tail which shocked me. A hawk is not an easy thing to kill quietly. 2 rabbits, 1 gray fox curled on its side, perfect and unmarked, as if it had simply stopped. And one thing I couldn't identify from the catwalk, something larger, dark, that I decided not to look at too closely. They were arranged in a very specific way. That was the thing I couldn't argue myself around. Placed at the 4 compass points, not points in between, in a pattern that felt intentional without quite resolving into anything I could name. I climbed down and looked at them in the growing light and felt something move through me like a cold current in a warm river. I radioed dispatch. I described what I'd found. Dispatch was quiet for a moment and then asked if I felt like I was in danger. I said I didn't know. And then they said they'd try to get a ranger up the access road by afternoon. I said that'd be fine. The ranger never came, big surprise. Radio traffic later that day told me there had been a vehicle accident on Highway 70 and resources were tied up. I understood that. The dead animals in a circle around my tower were not, objectively, a safety emergency. They were disturbing for sure. They were very disturbing, but nobody was bleeding, and someone on 70 was. I buried what I found, same as before. It took most of the morning. That night, I didn't see 1 figure at the tree line. I saw 3. Spread out, evenly spaced, standing in the dark at the edge of the northern timber, faces, if they had faces I could see, turned up toward the tower. Standing, with that same eerie stillness that made them less like people waiting and more like posts driven into the earth. I watched them for 45 minutes. None of them moved. I didn't call out this time. I didn't use the flashlight. I watched them until the cold forced me inside, and when I looked again through the window, the tree line was empty. I didn't sleep that night. Day 6, Sunday. Weather, overcast. High 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind east at 12, smelling of rain that never came. I found the door open in the morning, shortly after my morning patrol. It wasn't broken, it wasn't forced. The deadbolt had been engaged the night before. I remember engaging it, remember hearing the snick of the bolt before I'd been paying attention to it. But the door was open 6 inches, and the lock was unlocked. There was mud on the floor inside that hadn't been there the night before. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Nothing appeared to be missing. The radio was there, the maps, my food, my kit, everything in its place, which somehow made it worse than if something had been taken, because it meant whoever had been inside didn't really want anything. They just wanted to be inside, wanted me to know they could get inside. The mud prints went to the center of the floor and stopped. They didn't seem to go anywhere else. Someone had walked in, stood in the middle of the room, and then just left, without touching anything. I found a mark on the wooden floor in the center of the prints, scratched into the wood with something sharp. It was a symbol I didn't recognize, a circle with lines radiating from it like a crude sun, with a vertical line bisecting the circle. Rough work, quick, but focused. I photographed it with my Instamatic camera I'd brought for fire documentation. I locked the door and I sat in the cab all day long. I did my observation rotations. I ate, I drank water, I kept the radio close to me. I thought very seriously about packing my gear and walking out to the truck. But then, I thought about the man with the pale gray eyes and the way he said nothing that ought to concern the Forest Service. And something in me went quiet and hard, the way it does sometimes when I'm being told what to do and I don't want to be told what to do. I've been that way ever since I was 8 years old. My ex-wife called it stubbornness. My former supervisor called it an asset. I'd call it a character defect that has occasionally served me well. I remembered all the way back to about 4th grade when I had my first male teacher. For some reason, whenever I had a male teacher, I would always buck back against them. I would always have something to say and never do what I'm told. So I decided to stay. I moved the cot to the corner with the best sight line to the door, and I spent the night with the folding hatchet I used for kindling in my right hand, and I watched the door until the gray light came through the windows. Day 7, Monday. Weather, clear, cold. High 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Heavy frost on the catwalk at dawn. Wind, light and variable. The frost told me something useful. If anyone approached the tower in the pre-dawn hours, they'd have left prints in it. So, naturally, I checked at first light. The clearing around the tower was undisturbed. Clean frost from the catwalk rail all the way to the tree line. No figures at the tree line the night before either. I watched it until 0100 and then finally slept, fitfully, in the corner with my hatchet. I spent the morning doing something I should have done earlier, systematically mapping the terrain around the tower in detail, marking on my topo map every draw and drainage and fold in the earth where a group of people could shelter without being visible from elevation. I don't know why I didn't do this before. The drainage to the north was the obvious choice. It ran east-west, sheltered by steep walls of mixed conifer on both sides, accessible from the eastern ridge without crossing the observation clearings. A good campsite, honestly, if you wanted to be invisible. In the afternoon, I finally came to a decision. I was going to go down to that drainage. I know how that sounds. I'm not writing this down to sound brave or courageous. I'm writing it down because at the time, it felt like the only way to stop the thing that was happening from happening on their terms and not my terms. Whatever they were doing, the figures, the animals, the man who'd come up to ask me questions, the mud prints, the mark on the floor, it was designed to make me afraid and off balance. And it was working. The only cure I could think of for being so afraid of something you can't see was to just go look at it. So I waited until 14:30, full of daylight, good visibility. I left the radio on in the cab with the door locked, a bit of theater in case anyone was watching the tower. I took my binoculars, a notebook, the trusty hatchet, a water bottle, and walked north toward the drainage. It took 20 minutes to reach the tree line, another 10 minutes through the timber to the drainage rim. I went slowly, I went quietly. What I found at the bottom of the drainage, I wasn't ready for. A camp, but not a recreational camp or a church camp of any kind. Not the kind I've managed for 11 years. No tents, no coolers, no folding chairs. What they had was a structure, a rough lodge or longhouse built from cut poles and canvas and what looked like salvaged lumber, low to the ground, longer than it was wide, maybe 40 feet long. Smoke came from a hole in the center of the roof and a thin gray thread that dispersed before it cleared the drainage walls, which was why I'd never seen it from the tower. Around the structure, people moved. I counted 8 before I stopped counting, because they kept moving in and out of sight, and because what they were doing made counting feel like the wrong activity. They were working, quietly, methodically, with the focused energy of people engaged in preparation. Some carried things toward a flat area of ground at the east end of the structure, an area that had been cleared of brush and leveled, the earth tamped down. Others worked at what appeared to be an altar, a rough lodge or longhouse built from cut poles and canvas and what looked like salvaged lumber, low to the ground, longer than it was wide, maybe 40 feet long. Some carried things toward a flat area of ground at the east end of the structure, an area that had been cleared of brush and leveled, the earth tamped down. though I don't want to use that word because it carries more weight than I'm comfortable assigning to something I was looking at through binoculars from 150 yards away. But that's what it looked like, an altar. Stone and wood, roughly constructed, waist-high, with dark staining on its flat upper surface that I didn't look at for very long. I was there for maybe 20 minutes before I heard something behind me. I turned, slowly. The man with the pale gray eyes was standing 6 feet away, looking at me with an expression that wasn't angry nor surprised. It was something else, something calm and purposeful that scared me in a way that anger just couldn't have. "We were wondering when you'd come down," he said. I stood up. "Forest Service," I said, which was reflex, pure muscle memory from 11 years of it. "I know what you are," he said. "You told me that already. The question is whether you know what we are." "Tell me," I said. "In time," he said. "Everything in time." He smiled. "We'd be pleased to have you join us for the ceremony. On the 13th night, it's a significant date for us. The 13th night of my rotation, 5 days away." "What kind of ceremony?" I asked. He tilted his head the way a dog does when it hears a sound it can't quite place. "The kind that requires a witness," he said, "or a participant. We're open to either." I looked at him for a long moment and then said, "I'm going back to my tower." "Of course," he said pleasantly. "You know where to find us." I walked back up through the timber and across the clearing, and climbed the tower and locked the door and sat down on the floor with my back to the wall and the hatchet in my lap and tried to stop shaking long enough to write any of this down. I don't think these are campers. I don't think they're a spiritual retreat in any sense that I recognize. I think something is going to happen on the 13th night, and I think the man with the gray eyes is exactly as comfortable with whatever that something is as he appears to be.
Sounds like things are starting to get a little hairy. This spiritual retreat sounds a little sketchy. What do you think? This story was so good we had to split it into 2 parts. And trust me, dear listeners, you don't want to miss part 2, which is coming soon. I'll just tell you that Joel got far more than he bargained for. Thank you for tuning in to The Midnight Holler, hosted by WHAINT Radio. Good night.
It's 1976, where the river meets the Styx. I seem to have slipped through space and time. The clock stuck at 12:04. The daylight is no more. Something's watching from the wood line next door. So until the sunrise breaks, we'll keep doing what it takes. Keep the fire lit and the radio on for now. You better bundle up tight, 'cause the Midnight Holler's on tonight. You tune into WHAINT.